not forthright and honest, will suffice, I think, to do a great deal of damage to people who are a bit clueless about why they believe what they believe. I think he will, to that extent, be successful.
Yeah, I wrote an ebook. I called it Peter Boghossian, Atheist Tactician. He's really a strategist, meaning that he's really mixed up on what he's teaching, but the methods by which he's trying to communicate these things have great potential to be effective, because where he is weak in epistemology, in spite of his claims, he is actually quite strong in persuasion theory. He has a lot of experience in that. He's done a lot of persuasion theory work in prisons in Oregon, where he lives. He teaches at Portland State University. And so if you take someone that's vulnerable to persuasion, he's got the goods. And so maybe we should role play an interaction. Do you want to be the street epistemologist or the vulnerable Christian?
I'll be the hapless, vulnerable Christian. You be the street epistemologist, okay. And we'll show you how this works.
All right.
He gives examples in the book, by the way, so we're not making this up out of thin air. He gives multiple examples of these from his own practice, he says.
So, Mr. Hapless Christian, HC, he likes putting these examples with initials, so we could call you Mr. HC, and that would be quite in line with him. So tell me, do you believe that Jesus walked on the water? You believe he walked on?
Sure, that's, I mean,
well,
yeah.
How sure are you of that? I mean, on a scale of 1 to...
Well, I mean, the Bible says he walked on water.
The Bible says he walked on water. But how do you know that he walked on water?
Well, I mean, I read it in the Bible.
You read it in the Bible.
Yeah.
So how do you know the Bible is true? Because if the Bible isn't true, then you have to have some confidence in that too.
Well, how could it not be true?
How could it not be true?
Yeah, I mean, it seems so true. When I read it, I feel the truth of what it's saying.
You feel the truth of what it's saying. So you've got this sense of a. But what's the evidence that it's true?
Well, it's the feeling that I have when I read it.
Okay. Have you ever encountered anyone else in another religion that had a feeling about a book that they read in their religion?
I don't really talk to a lot of people in other religions, so I'm not really sure.
You're not really sure. Do you suppose a Mormon might feel that their book is true?
Maybe.
Maybe. Do you suppose a Muslim might feel like the Quran is true?
Yeah, I'd be pretty confident of that.
Yeah, okay. Well then, what makes your feeling any more valuable and valid than theirs? As far as, maybe their book is just as true as your book.
No, well, I mean, but mine's a belief in the Bible, and so that's different.
That's different? How is it different?
Well,
what makes the Bible
because
different?
the Bible's it's an older book than these books, and you know, my pastor uses it every week. It changes lives.
It changes
I've seen it change lives. Yeah. Okay.
And so, and Mormons and Muslims and maybe believers in other religions would say the same thing too. I'm actually just, you know, I'm not attacking your religion. I'm just trying to understand. I just want to get this clear in my mind, because I'm confused. What is it about the Bible changing lives that's different from what I know? Mormons and Muslims, and I just picked them up because I know they've got other books that they really rely on. What makes that yours any different than theirs?
Boy, it's hard for me to try to put it into words, but I can just sort of tell when I read it, I guess.
Okay. Now I don't know how he would close that conversation, but what he's trying to do is to undermine not the facts. I didn't attack his facts. I undermined his way of knowing whether Jesus walked on water.
Right. My confidence, as it turned out as the little conversation went on, came down just to, but I sort of can feel it. And then, quite reasonably, he said, do you suppose others sort of feel it as well? And I didn't have really much to say in response. I might not, in this particular conversation, go any further than that. And here's something very smart that Boghossian says. He says, you don't have to get the person all the way Just start sowing those seeds of doubt, right? That's enough. And that might be all that you need to do in one conversation.
Right. It's all about, and he doesn't, he advises, do not attack the facts. Because when you attack the religious facts, then what you're doing is you're attacking the whole complex around it, which includes family and how you spend your Sunday morning and what your friends think of you and your prayer times and everything else like that. That's too big of a wall to push against. He wants to attack the way people think about reality. What's really interesting about that approach, how many of you are familiar with Josh McDowell? Very prominent Christian apologist. I have heard him use exactly the same approach with high schoolers, where he went into the crowd. This is where I saw it was at a Christian high school in Escondido, California, and he had a young man, a high schooler, stand up and he said, "Do you believe this book is true?" He's holding the Bible up, and the man and the boy said, "Yeah, I believe it's true," and all the crowd cheered. Yeah. Well, and so how do you know it's true? Well, because it's the Bible. Yay! Well, how do you know the Bible is true? Because I have faith. Yay! And he said, "Don't Mormons have faith? Don't Muslims have faith?" And the crowd didn't go, "Yay." But from there, and at that point, he's doing exactly the same thing, except for from that point, he goes on to say something about how if you use evidence to examine your faith, you can actually get to a good reason to believe that the Bible is true, other than just, "I have faith." So the technique, as far as it goes, it's a Socratic technique. It's a really good technique. Question asking is a really good way to get to knowledge. But you can use question asking to steer somebody into a dead end too.
Sure, and Boghossian's actually not above doing that.
Right.
For example, in one of the interventions, as he likes to call them, you could already see he's co-opting this terminology.
It's a treatment.
Yes.
He's called it sometimes too. How would you like to be treated for your religion? It's like, okay.
Right. We're staging an intervention with your faulty epistemology.
Yeah.
In one of them, he tries to pin a guy down by saying, "So, what would you do if you were convinced that God was telling you to go out and, kill small children or..."
Left-handed people.
Left-handed people. Kill all the left-handed people there are. And this person says, "Well, that God wouldn't do that." No, but just what if? What if you were completely convinced that that's what God was telling you to do? What would you do? Now, notice that what he's doing is he's insisting on backing this guy into a scenario that the guy is saying is not a viable scenario. Once he gets him, maybe just by force of personality.
Kind of like, what if you believed something that you don't believe, actually? But what if you believed it?
Right. Maybe even what if you believe something you don't even think is possible? Then what would you do? Would you go out and kill all the left-handed people? And so by framing it that way, he's put this person in a position of imagining something that he doesn't actually think God would do, maybe thinks isn't even possible that God should do. And then he's going to push on whatever answer he gives and try to push him into some kind of cognitive dissonance where he'll say, "Oh, now my beliefs seem unsettled."
I'll quote it here.
Yeah, go ahead, read it.
Yeah, this is on page 91 of the book. The young man says, "What's your point?" And he says, "I don't really have a point. I'm just trying to figure out the limits of your faith. It seems to me that your faith is limitless. You do anything you think that God wanted you to do, including murder innocents." Innocent, as in TS at the end. Innocent people. Look, he says, "I'm trying to figure out the limits of your faith." The guy had already stated his limits. And Boghossian said, suppose those weren't your limits.
Then what would be the limits?
And then what would be the limits? Which is just illegitimate as all get out. But he's really proud of himself. He thinks that's a really good thing to model and emulate. He's not entirely honest. The definition of faith, where did he get this definition of faith from? That faith is belief without evidence, or that it's pretending to know what you don't know.
Let me make a point here. Suppose that you were, as perhaps at some point some of you have been, a firmly convinced atheist. You thought Christians really had just a wacky, delusional set of beliefs about God, reality, the universe. You might think that they were pretending to know some things that in fact they didn't know. But that would not mean that when they say they have faith, they mean, I'm pretending to know things I don't know. That wouldn't be what they mean by the word. It might be where you thought they ended up getting classified in an appropriate classification of rightness and wrongness. But it would be an equivalent thing if on the other side I were to say, atheists are people who pretend to know things they don't know about the existence of God. And that's my definition. So if you call yourself an atheist, I say, so you mean you're someone who's pretending to know something you don't know about the existence of God. I think Boghossian would get pretty upset with that. And I think he would be right to be upset with that. That would be appropriate because I would be saddling him with a definition which is not the definition that he himself gives to the term. I might think, as a Christian who thinks the evidence strongly supports the existence of God, I might think that atheists are in fact pretending to know things about the existence of God they don't, or misevaluating the evidence for the existence of God. I could give unflattering kinds of characterizations, but that's not a definition of an atheist, and similarly, it is an inappropriate definition of faith. Even if you think people who have faith are wrong, it's still not the right definition. That short-circuits the process of giving evidence because you've defined them into being delusional. And in fact, this gets to one of my pet peeves about the book, which is in giving pieces of advice to his street epistemologists who are going to go out and do these interventions, he specifically says, he even has it broken out as a header, avoid facts. And his reason for this is that if you start arguing with them about facts, then in his judgment, you're going to get entangled in a big verbal wrangle about a whole bunch of stuff where they will reinterpret things right. Of course, they couldn't just be right. They have to be reinterpreting things. So that won't get you anywhere. Instead of talking about facts, you should focus on reliable ways of coming to knowledge. But that discussion's already been short-circuited by his definition of faith as an unreliable epistemology. So the avoidance of facts, I don't know, we're talking about questions of what's real. Is there really a God? Is that the way that things are? Does avoiding facts seem like a good way to come to a reasonably grounded belief on that question? No. So that is, I think, a real weakness of his approach, and yet it's also part of what makes it insidious, because frankly, many Christians are all too happy to avoid facts because they don't know them.
Right.
And if they're unprepared, they may be led quite a ways down the garden path by one of Boghossian's street epistemologists before they realize quite what's going on.
So where does he get this definition from? He gave a talk to the Humanists of Greater Portland, and you can look it up under that name on YouTube or videos or something like that. And someone asked him at the end of the talk, where did you get this definition from? And he said, I don't have any real source for it. I don't have any empirical source for it. Well, I thought that was refreshingly honest. The idea that faith is belief without evidence, as far as I know, you've got more historical background than I have in these things. As far as I know, it goes back to a statement by Ambrose Bierce in the Devil's Dictionary late in the 19th century. And as far as I know, that's the first appearance of the definition of faith being belief without evidence. Now, if you look in the dictionary, you will often find it defined as belief without proof. But belief without proof is not the same as belief without evidence. And proof is a very difficult word to define.